Hey, I'm Johnny Barfus from Handi Quilter. I'm an educator here. With me is...
I'm Kelly Ashton.
So we're here at our Watch and Learn today. We're going to talk about stitching in the ditch, and specifically the stitch in the ditch ruler.
Yeah.
And Kelly, tell them, this is Kelly's favorite ruler, right?
Well, one of my favorites.
One of them.
It just depends on the day, right? Depends on if I need to stitch in the ditch that day. So.
Okay, yes. So we're going to talk about stitching in the ditch. All right. So we're going to talk about pressing. When you're pressing your seams, right? We're going to talk about how to use the ruler and some other things.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So I think we've talked about it before, but stitching in the ditch is a personal choice. I love to stitch in the ditch on my quilts. I feel like it really finishes the piecing. Mm-hmm. But the other thing it does for me, it really helps me to keep my quilt square. It also helps to keep any fullness where the fullness is supposed to be.
Love
so
that.
if I have a really puffy block, I'm not going to like push that fullness off to the next one or a wavy border. I've got to keep the fullness where that fullness should initially be. So by stitching in the ditch around a block, I can keep everything where it's supposed to be, or by stitching in the ditch around borders. Like this quilt top has 4 different borders. So if any of them have any wave to them at all, they're not laying perfectly flat, I have to be able to keep that fullness in the border. So by stitching in the ditch, even on this thin brown one, it's only 1 inch thick, it just kind of finishes that, and I just like the look of it. So it's a personal choice. So I'm just talking to those of you who want to stitch in the ditch, because everyone doesn't like to stitch in the ditch, but I like it.
Yeah, and if you are afraid of it or something, give it a try. That's all I have to say. If you're one of those persons that's like, no, I don't want to stitch in the ditch, then we're just going to encourage you to try it out.
Okay, and this would be with custom quilting. I would not be stitching in the ditch around a quilt that I'm going to finish edge to edge.
Right.
So this is just when I'm custom quilting, I'm breaking down the parts of the quilt and quilting them individually.
Love that.
Okay, so we have all kinds of awesome straight rulers. You can stitch in the ditch with anything that has a nice straight edge. Remember, our rulers have a 1/4 of an inch. They're a 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, then there's a couple of other tools that you'll need to make sure that you're using. And one is your ruler base. Make sure you have your ruler base in place before you're using rulers. And then I love the sure foot. Your machine came with a round foot that we initially called the ruler foot, because you can use rulers on any edge of that foot. But when we came out with the sure foot, it was designed a little higher profile, so it makes it just safer that you can't easily bounce the ruler up on top and fit it between the foot and the needle. So it's kind of an insurance policy. Just kind of helps you keep from hitting that. So, all right, let's talk about stitching in the ditch. This is a really strongly opinionated thing for different people. So I hope I don't make anybody mad. But when you're piecing your quilt, you need to think about how you want it quilted. Okay, so I'm quilting right now at home. I'm piecing one of the big butterfly quilts
By Elizabeth Hartman.
Elizabeth Hartman, yeah. And I believe the pattern recommends that you quilt press the seams open. So anywhere in the butterfly wings that are in the center of the wings, I'm pressing them open because that's what it's recommended, and I don't want all the bulk. But I know that I want to stitch in the ditch around that butterfly. So on my edge seams of the butterfly, I'm pressing them to one side. It's my opinion that you don't have a ditch to stitch in if you've pressed help me out, the seams open.
If you've prepped your seams open, you don't have a ditch. So explain that a little bit more, because I just don't know if everybody understands that.
So I'm not comfortable stitching down the center of a seam that's had this seams pressed open, because all I'm stitching on is the thread.
Yeah, it's just thread.
It's really thread. I'll be okay like top stitching. I'll stitch off to the side just a tiny bit, and that has a beautiful look too. So there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to stitch in the ditch, you need to have your seams pressed to one side. And they need to be pressed to one side, not halfway this way and halfway this way. You lost your ditch if you do that too. So pressing is really important if you like the stitching in the ditch look.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
I think that's we made that point.
Okay, all right.
So did you want to show one of these samples that you've done?
So these are just some samples of stitching in the ditch, and this one doesn't have a border, so you really can't tell. But I've stitched in the ditch on the low side of the seam. And normally I would choose to use the color that's on the low side. Because of the way this pattern was designed, mine are actually pressed to the white. So got rid of that rule that said pressed to the dark, right? These are actually pressed to the white. So the low side is the dark side of the fabric. But I have stitched in the ditch on the low side. So a couple of tips that I'm going to give for stitching in the ditch. The first is low side. If you can, choose the color of the thread that matches the fabric on the low side.
Okay.
On this particular quilt, I didn't do that. I chose white thread, but I chose 100 weight thread, so it's really fine. So you're not going to really see that thread very much anyway. But it also helps if you make your stitches smaller. So I put my stitches per inch at 13 or 14 stitches per inch. And you don't want to pick those out. But they do just kind of hide them right there in that seam, so you really can't see you can't see the stitches. And this is also white thread. It's the same kind of, but I've stitched on the low side. So that's your goal when you're stitching in the ditch, is to stitch on the low side of the fabric. It's not 100% possible. It doesn't always work out that way.
It doesn't always, but usually.
Work out. Yeah.
So I just want to make a note really quick. We chose this quilt here. We've shown it before, but this is a quilt that I made for our Moxie booth. We chose it because I did do stitching in the ditch. And I just used white, or I don't know, a really micro quilter. So talk to us more about thread choices.
Can you trim that for me?
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Where am I trimming?
Right there.
Oh, did I not thread it?
You did. I just moved it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So thread choices when you're stitching in the ditch?
Yeah. So would you just use any thread or like a finer thread? You said the 100 weight that you used.
I used 100 weight just because I was stitching that quilt with that. I would use any weight thread, but truthfully, if you want to hide your thread, use a fine thread. So a 50 or 60 would be totally appropriate if you're going to hide your thread.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So that's why we chose this quilt here, because I did do that stitching in the ditch around all those colored blocks. I just really wanted those to pop. That's why I kind of chose that to do that. So these little blocks would really pop on the quilting, would pop the colors out. And this sample that Kelly has is a little mini that I made with the offcuts of a quilt similar.
You have your glasses on. You're going to have to thread
I'll have to take them off.
Oh, you do?
I'm nearsighted.
This is 100 weight thread, and I don't have my glasses on. So a tip to threading the needle is to find the groove that's in the front of the needle and slide the thread down that groove, and then it'll generally slip right in the hole. But because
I got it, even on camera.
The camera's rolling, I can't do it. So, okay, so I'm going to give you just a little demonstration of the stitching in the ditch. Okay, if I can grab that. Okay, any type of straight ruler would work fine. I like my needle to be down when I push stop, so I'm switching that. So this is a great straight ruler. It works fine. But just a couple years ago, they came out with this, my new stitching in the ditch favorite ruler. It's called the HQ Ditch. And if you can see those little tabs, so it's straight, but it has a little tab at the end of each, or at each end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So all I have to do for that is, and they're 1/4 of an inch. And how far away is my stitch from the edge of the foot?
1/4 of an
It's
inch.
1/4 of an inch.
So these are 1/4 inch feet that we have.
So let me tell you about my settings on the machine. I have it in cruise, but I'm going to put it at very low setting. I like it at 25 or 50. I still like it in cruise, but I have it at a low setting. Then I have my stitches per inch set at 13. Okay, I have the ruler base in place and I have the shore foot on. And I'm just taking this stitch in the ditch ruler and I'm pushing that nub right up on the, I'm on the low side, holding it on the low side, and I'm pushing it right up against that fabric. And I don't have to go fast, I can go slow, but I'm just want it right up against that color. And I go slow enough that if I get one stitch too high or too low, I can just adjust it just like that. Okay?
As a side note, this was pieced by Johnny, not by Kelly. So that's why it's not exact everywhere.
No. My piecing is not ever exact, so you don't need to apologize for anything.
I'm not apologizing. I'm just saying maybe that's why.
Yeah. No, it's just, all right. And I'm like we talked about, we're using 100 weight thread. We're actually using a light blue, but you can't see it at all on those stitches. So
I just had a micro quilter at my desk, so I just grabbed it really quick. So
yeah, it works perfectly. So anytime you can put it on the low side, it's the easiest. Like this side, my high side is over here, so I could hold it over like this. But I can hold it on either side. It just really works well if I just push that right up against. Now here's the end, so I'm going to just go to this side because it's a little easier for me. And just like that. So if you want to give it a go and try some stitching in the ditch, I'm just going to say this is your new best friend. I love the
ditch ruler.
Yeah.
I like it too because of the size. It feels really good on my hands.
It is a good size.
I like the size of it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
There's not a right and a wrong. If you like to stitch in the ditch or you want to give it a try, these are some tools that'll help you be successful.
Awesome.
So don't be, feel bad if you don't like stitching in the ditch. That's okay too.
Personal preference.
Yeah, it is. Okay, stay tuned. We're going to give you a little preview of our Swish ruler. That's the ruler for April in our ruler of the month number 8. We'll be right back.
We've got our Swish template here. This one is super cool. Let's take a look at what we can do with this one. Here we go. Look at this. How fun is that? Let me just reiterate that the template itself doesn't make the feathers or the straight lines. Actually, the straight lines I did do with the ruler. But it makes this spine here that we can use as our base. So I am going to just hold this up here. And you can see I just stitched from one point all the way to the other point, stopped with my needle in the down position, and then I shifted the ruler over, making sure to keep it lined up using my grid lines. Stitch down and over, and you can just continue shifting as you go along, and then go back and do some fills. I use a straight edge side ruler to make some piano keys to fill that in. So lots of fun things. Let's look at this next design here. This one is similar, but if you look closely, I stitched out this first section, and I have lines that were marked to show where the point was. And then I shifted. Oh wait, no, that doesn't work. Watch what you can do here. I'm going to take the ruler, instead of shifting, I'm going to flip it upside down. Okay? So I'm going to put that right in there, and then I can stitch this part. Again, flip the ruler over and continue on. So that gives it a completely different look. It almost looks like a mustache right here. So that's a fun one. Okay, so as I mentioned, I had some lines drawn down these center points. And so I did this exact same thing, just upside down. Okay, so I'm going to start here, stitching here, flipping it over, coming around, flipping it over. And what a fun design that gives you. And then I had this open area here that I didn't really want to leave open, so I just free motioned a cute little design in there, and that just adds to the effect of it. Okay, let's look right here. This is that same thing. I'm going to stitch along, shifting over, and I did that all the way down one time, and I've got a line drawn. You might be able to see this line. It's the center of my border, and that is what I used to line this up. So I've got a grid line here that goes right through that start point and that end point. So I lined that up with my mark that I made on the quilt. And then I just shifted it over to make this kind of ribbon look. So really fun to play with. Okay, let's do some stitching with this one. Forgot my clamps. Can't stitch without my clamps. Okay, I have a very, very faint center line marked already on here. So I'm just putting my needle in there, bringing up my bobbin, doing my tie off. So using these grid lines going across, I'm going to bump the ruler up against my foot and then line it up with this really, really faint line right there. Okay, this ruler can be a little bit more awkward to hold, So play with your hand placement, and remember, if you do need to shift your hand, just pause or stop with the needle in the down position and then reposition your hand. Okay, so we're going to stitch hugging onto that ruler, keeping it against the ruler, coming down, making sure you have control. Ruler work isn't a speed game. Take your time with it. Be safe. Lining up with my existing mark there with my grid line, and I'm going to continue on. Okay, one of the things that I see the most with people using rulers that have curves is that they tend to go off into la-la land. So if you are coming along here, if you're not hugging up against that ruler, you're going to shift over. Can you see how I just kind of went off into la-la land? So I'm going to just bring it back. So here, really hug that ruler as you come around. Okay? Okay. That's our Swish template. See what kinds of designs you can come up with. Have fun.
That was awesome. I just love the way Christina teaches about rulers. She does such a great job. So I'm so excited about that, the Swish ruler. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it. Give us a like or subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and have fun quilting this week.